Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Ever wondered how other women manage their careers with motherhood? When I first became a mum, my fascination with how other women did it started. How were they combining their work and motherhood in a way that worked for them? Maybe I'm nosy, but I like to think of myself as curious. Maybe it's because I saw other women thriving and I wanted to know how they were doing it. I've learned over the years that a key element of performance is what they call in NLP modelling. Modelling is observing and copying the ways others achieve results, and it makes it easier to try out different approaches to see what works for us. If you want to know how to do something, find some people who are good at that thing and ask them what they do. And that's just what I'm going to be doing. If, like me, you find yourself wondering how other women do it, then you're going to want to make sure you're on my email list. In the next few weeks, I'll be sending out details of the How She Does It mini-series. For How She Does It, I'm interviewing 5 incredible working mothers and pulling back the curtains on how they do it, revealing the secrets, strategies and lessons that they've learned along the way that we can all learn from. You're not going to want to miss out on this. So head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk and make sure you've signed up to my emails and you can make sure you don't miss out. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm sharing 7 self-coaching questions to help you navigate the conflicting emotions around work and motherhood. If you find yourself kind of stuck between work and motherhood, if you're asking yourself, should I stay in my job? Should I leave? Should I look for a different role? If you find yourself pinballing between focusing on your career or leaving your job to try and navigate the often conflicting identities of work and family life, I want to share with you something that will help. I'm going to be sharing 7 powerful and very carefully curated questions that you can use to help you explore this. And to be honest, these coaching questions can be applied to anything. They are just so powerful in their own right, but they will help you to cut through conflicting emotions and thoughts about any decision you've got to make. But before I dive in, could you do me a huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or 3 working mums that pop into your head as you listen? My mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. And so I'd be really grateful if you supported them by offering this free podcast. I hope it's useful for you. And if so, I hope that you pass it on. And also, please consider rating and reviewing my show. Your review can help other people to find my podcast. So you'll be helping another working mum find this resource. Plus, as you know, I love to go in and read them. Just click the ratings and reviews and write a review where you listen to this podcast and let me know your feedback. Just like Rowena did, who left me this lovely review. She put, just what a working mum needs. Fabulous content. I found this when I was at my lowest and subsequently have used Nikki as an amazing executive coach full of empathy and support for the juggle of being a working parent. So thank you, Rowena, for listening, leaving a review, and also it's been a real honour to support you as your coach. So I really love it when I hear from listeners of this show. So please leave me a review and tag me on social media when you're listening. But let's go back to the 7 self-coaching questions to help you navigate the conflicting emotions around work and motherhood. You probably know my story by now. A year after having my first child, I returned to work, and just a few months later, I found myself in my doctor's office asking for help, as I knew my health was deteriorating. For months, I'd been feeling unwell and just had got cold after cold, and that had developed into more serious viruses that then just left me completely wiped out. And I was just struggling to get my health back on track. And so I knew something was going on because this was quite unusual for me, but I didn't know what. But I was just told by my doctor that I was a new mum and all mums are tired. But I knew something wasn't right, and I just didn't know what at that point. Fast forward 3 more visits to my doctor and numerous blood tests later, and I was still none the wiser for my increasing and deteriorating health issues. And I got to the point where I thought I'd got some serious kind of secret illness or cancer that nobody could detect, because I knew in every cell of my body I wasn't right. I kind of felt lost, hopeless and alone. And after a few more months of struggling, and with the fantastic support of an incredible health practitioner, Jo Gamble, who I've interviewed on this podcast, I finally got my diagnosis of adrenal fatigue. And as you know, I'd literally burnt myself out in that first year of motherhood. And I suppose after experiencing a high-risk pregnancy, having an emergency C-section, and then giving birth to my son, who we discovered had a hole in his heart when he was 5 weeks old, it had really taken its toll. And at 5 weeks old, my son was described as failing to thrive. It's a term that I still can't quite say without my own heart breaking a little. I'm told that they no longer use that term in the NHS, which is brilliant, because I just think it's a horrible term to describe a child and to share that with a mother. But the truth is that as a new mum, I too was failing to thrive. My son was approved for open heart surgery at just 7 weeks old, which was devastating. But thankfully, he defied the doctor's expectations, and the hole in his heart, which was really quite big and was in a fibrous part of his heart. So they didn't think that if it was in the muscle part, they expect it to close, but his was in kind of more fibrous tissue, so they weren't expecting it to close. But it actually did. It started to heal, and he started to thrive really quite quickly. And I loved my son and I loved being a mother, but I really struggled with the motherhood part. And I yearned for just really the certainty of my work. I got a sense of accomplishment and control, a sense of being capable and professional when I was at work. So I thought returning to my work after maternity leave would help me feel more myself. But it didn't, unfortunately. I found myself trapped between being the ideal worker and the ideal mother, falling into that so common trap of trying to work like I didn't have children and be a mother like I didn't work. So when I got my health diagnosis of adrenal fatigue, I knew something drastic had to happen. Something needed to change for me to help myself in recovering from that adrenal fatigue. And as the founder of my own business, I at least had the autonomy to change how I worked. I had more flexibility. So I actually tried working part-time, then flexi-time, hoping that a different working pattern would help me to get my health and my sanity back on track. But they didn't. So I took the really difficult decision to step away from my work completely to recover. And it felt difficult because work had been such an important part of my identity for so long. But also I'd worked damn hard to build my business. So there was this real reluctance to do it, but I felt that I'd got no choice. But the impact was really fascinating. What I learned was, despite having less responsibility in my work, I was still burnt out and tired. Even though I felt grateful that I had the privilege not to work, I felt even less of myself. I'd lost an essential part of my identity. It was then that I realised that I wanted to live well and work well, that the two aspects of my life were important to me, and I needed to find a way to incorporate them into my life in a sustainable way on my own terms. That was really when I had my epiphany. It wasn't about whether I worked or not, or about the number of hours I worked. They were absolutely influencing factors, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the actual answer to my problem. And that's when I knew something deeper needed to happen. And you've probably heard me refer to it as my breakdown to breakthrough experience. I had to completely rethink how I approached my life, not only on the surface in terms of what I did externally, but deeper than that. I had to really reconnect with what I really wanted and what I really needed before the world had told me what I should be doing. That's what led me to give birth to Wisdom for Working Mums, giving other women access to the tools that help me to flourish. And what I'm going to share with you now on these podcasts are 7 questions that I've carefully curated to help you decide what's right for you, to give you clarity and to help you navigate the often conflicting thoughts and feelings that we experience as we try to combine our work and motherhood. And the first question is asking yourself, what am I feeling? So what am I feeling can sound like a really simple question. And it is, but it goes deeper than that. So really, our feelings are chemically encoded data. So that's what emotions are. They're chemically encoded data, and they can offer us such wisdom if we can sit with them long enough to listen to their message. So when you ask yourself, what am I feeling? Can you identify the emotions? Are you tired? Are you resentful? Are you disappointed? Are you angry? The issue is that we're constantly experiencing new things, which means our emotions are really static, which complicates being able to identify what is going on with them. But the more you can get clear on the precise emotions you're feeling, the more empowered you'll be to take action. And this process is known as emotional granularity, or really it's about getting super specific about our emotions. This clarity isn't about just using the right vocabulary to describe your emotions, but it's really about experiencing the world and yourself more precisely. And this level of awareness is what's empowering. So as you think about whatever conflict you're trying to navigate, just get clear on what am I feeling and be willing to sit with the discomfort long enough to really start to identify those feelings. And that's the first step. You get the data and then you're empowered with more information to do something about it. Second question is, what do these emotions tell me about what's most important to me? So I'll say it again. What do these emotions tell me about what's most important to me? As I said, those emotions are chemically encoded data. And that question might sound like a simple question, but it's far more nuanced than it first appears. When I'm working with my clients, I encourage them to really figure out what's most important to me, but to dig deeper than the surface response. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion to get to what we would call your core values. And somebody might say, my children are important to me. And when I'm coaching, I would absolutely honour that response, but I'd ask them to dig a little bit deeper. What is it about their children that they find important? Is it love? Is it connection? Is it belonging? So if you can ask yourself, what do these emotions tell me about what's most important to me? And keep asking that question, what's most important to me? What's most important to me? Until feel that you've got a clear sense of it. And it won't necessarily come easily, because often we've been raised in a culture that tells us what's important, and we start to lose touch with our internal compass. But when we can start to understand our true core values, we can get away from scratching at the surface and try to meet them instead. And instead we can start to make kind of alignment about our decision and our directions, and we can align them really with our heart about what's most important. And often the conflict of work and motherhood is values becoming in conflict. And values don't necessarily have to be in conflict, but it can happen quite common experience that you might have somebody that might have a value of accomplishment or intellectual stimulation, and they've also got a value of family, so it might be connection or love. And it might feel like those values are in conflict. So when I'm going off and feeling like I'm accomplishing, I may not feel as connected to my family. And that creates this sense of internal conflict. And with values, what can happen is we either get paralysis where we sit in the middle and we don't really achieve either of the values, or we get this pendulum effect where we swing and go and feel accomplished, but we're like, whoa, I don't feel connected to my family. So we swing the other way and do the connection piece, and then we go, whoa, but I don't feel that I've got my sense of accomplishment. And we're working at a surface level thinking these two are mutually exclusive. But when we can start to understand the level that sits underneath this, again, it's really empowering. So the third question is, what stops me from living my life in a way that aligns with what's most important to me? So I'll say that again. What stops me from living my life in a way that aligns with what's most important to me? As I said, what we've done up to now is get clear on what's important. Now it's about looking at what gets in the way. The chances are that there are external constraints, and the clearer you can be on them, the more empowered you'll be. But maybe there are also some internal constraints. Sometimes we unconsciously create self-imposed restrictions, and I know that I've done this a lot in my own life. Perhaps there's a story that you're telling yourself that's stopping you. And this requires a level of self-awareness and honesty, because sometimes we just can't see the stories that we're telling ourselves, as we believe that they're a reality, that they're a narrative that we've adopted along the way. They almost become the air that we breathe and we can't see it. And I've had to, as I say, help face some unhelpful stories. For example, I had a story that a good mother is always there for a child, which meant I constantly felt guilty when I was working. Or I had a story that I can only be professional and do a good job for my clients if I'm available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, which meant I constantly felt like I was failing if I tried to plan my work around my family commitments. So understanding these blockers are really what's key to enable you to flourish. Not only those external constraints, but also those self-imposed constraints that can cause frustration and could be helping you to keep stuck. And the fourth question is, what would I be giving up by leaving? So I'm sharing these in the context of if you were thinking about leaving your job or leaving your role, but this could be about anything, leaving, a place where you live, leaving your home, or you could change the words to apply to what's the conflict that you're experiencing. But the key part of this question is, what would I be giving up? So with any change, there is inevitably some compromise or loss, and being clear about what you would be saying goodbye to may clarify whether you're really prepared to let it go. So for many of us, our work is not only a source of income, but really informs our sense of purpose. It impacts our self-confidence, and it really enables our social connections, our network and the people we spend time with outside of our family. So taking all these things into consideration is really important to make an informed decision. And it's important to think about what you would be giving up both short-term and long-term. The next question, so the fifth question is, what would I gain? So again, in the context of thinking about your work, what would I gain by leaving? Because the question explores what benefits you might gain. And if you really reflect on this question, you might not only get the primary gain, and the primary gain is what we would call the one that you're conscious of, but also the secondary gain, which is generally unconscious. So for every behaviour, there's normally a primary and a secondary gain. And if you can get to both of those, that's when you get really good information. And again, it's important to consider the short-term and long-term impact of this question, as it really helps you to consider the consequences in a more holistic way of any decision that you're going to make. The next question, so question number 6 is, what other options do I have? When we feel under pressure or overwhelmed, it's really easy for our thinking to become more rigid. We can fall into unhelpful thinking patterns, and in psychological terms, we call this cognitive distortions, which really limit our ability to assess our situation and options effectively. So this question about what other options do I have is designed to really open up your creative thinking and take you away from that all or nothing or overgeneralizing or jumping to conclusions or kind of black and white thinking. If you can sit with this question long enough, you can begin to explore all the possibilities that exist and move away from just focusing on the limitations. And I promise you, there are always more options than we think are available. You could ask this question in a number of different ways. So not only what other options do I have, you could ask, what would a wise friend tell you are your options? What would Richard Branson tell you are your options? think about it from the perspective of other people. What would a stranger on the street tell you are your options? Because it helps get out of the way of your own thinking patterns, because our mind is a brilliant tool, but often can become quite rigid in its ability to think. It has well-trodden paths, neurological paths that mean that we tend to think the same things, and sometimes we can't see or think. It's that kind of unconscious incompetence. What don't I know? What don't I know about what I don't know? So by thinking about what other options do I have? What might somebody else tell me are my options? Enables you to step outside of that. And the final question is question number 7. If anything was possible, what would I do? So if anything was possible, what would I do? And again, this final question is designed to help you think outside your current reality. We tend to make assumptions about how life is and what we can do. But if you free yourself to think outside of that, as I've said before, what is currently happening or what you consider to be possible, you might find a solution that is absolutely achievable with the right mindset behind it. So if anything was possible, what would I do? If I could give you that magic wand, what would you want to happen? And just see what comes to mind. And there might be kind of reactions to that that's not possible, that could never happen. And that's okay, just notice that. But if anything was possible, what would I do? And that often will really tap into your heart's desire, what you really want beneath all that conflict. I hope these 7 coaching questions help you to explore how to combine your work and motherhood successfully and sustainably, and help you really explore any conflict that you're experiencing, knowing that there is no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about exploring the right answer for you and your life. Because here's to finding the path that supports you to flourish, wherever that may take you. Because I'm a great believer that we only get this one precious life, and you deserve to enjoy that journey. I'd love to hear any insights you've had from this episode, so drop me a note on social media or email me. I would genuinely love to hear. Thanks so much for hanging out with me in this episode. Could you do me that huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or 3 working mums that pop into your head as you listen? As I've said, it's my mission to support as many working mums as possible on their journey, and I'd be so grateful if you supported them by offering this free podcast. I hope it's been useful for you, and if it has, can you pass it on to another working mum or 2, please? Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.